The Altar of Death. In the summer of 1571, beneath the chanting of priests and the flicker of candlelight, the most dangerous wedding night in height, Russian history was quietly prepared not with daggers or swords, but with faith, fear, and a substance believed to heal. Marfa Sobakina was only 19 when she stepped toward the altar, her white garments heavy with imperial expectation, her fate already sealed by forces she could not see. Chroniclers would later whisper that the poison had begun its work even before the wedding crown touched her hair, that the bridal chamber itself had become an execution ground disguised as holy ritual. Moscow watched in silence as bells rang for celebration, unaware that this union would last barely 15 days and would ignite one of the darkest chapters in the reign of Ivan the Terrible. To the court, the marriage promised stability, heirs, and relief from years of bloodshed and suspicion. To the Tsar, it was a desperate grasp at order after the unexplained deaths of previous wives and children. Yet beneath the silk and incense lay a hidden anxiety that had haunted royal women for generations. The demand to conceive immediately, to prove worth through fertility alone, and to survive customs older than memory. What followed was not immediate death, but something far crueler. As the wedding celebrations echoed through palace halls, Marfa's body began to betray her in silence. Her skin paled, her strength faded, and her eyes lost the calm that had so impressed the Tsar during the brutal bride selection weeks earlier. Servants noticed her trembling hands. Physicians argued in whispers, offering herbs and prayers while avoiding the truth no one dared speak aloud. To accuse a mother was dangerous. To admit poisoning on the Tsar's wedding night was unthinkable. And so the ceremony was completed, the marriage consummated in ritual if not in health, while the young Tsarina lay weakening behind thick curtains, surrounded by priests chanting for salvation that would never come. When death finally arrived 15 days later, it did not end the tragedy, it multiplied it. Ivan did not mourn quietly. He searched for enemies, not answers. Rumors of powders and potions turned into accusations, and mercy vanished from Moscow's streets. Executions followed suspicion, and blood was spilled to satisfy a grief that could not be undone. What historians would later uncover, buried beneath fear and propaganda, was that this wedding night did more than kill a bride. It shattered the last restraint of a ruler already feared, transforming private loss into public terror. And as the candles burned down in the bridal chamber of 1571, Russia stood unknowingly at the edge of an age ruled not by law or faith, but by paranoia born from a mother's desperate love. Marfa emerged from this ordeal as an unexpected victor. Chroniclers described her as calm where others trembled, modest yet composed, a presence that suggested obedience without weakness. Her family ties and her health reports placed her above rivals, and when her name was announced, bells rang as if the empire itself exhaled. Yet even as celebrations began, something shifted. Observers noted that the chosen bride grew quiet, then pale, then visibly tired. The endless rituals continued regardless. She was paraded, blessed, instructed, and confined, each step draining what strength remained. To question the process was forbidden. To pause it was impossible. The machinery of tradition moved forward, indifferent to the human body caught within it. Foreign envoys, writing in coded letters, sensed danger. They spoke of a court saturated with fear, where doctors dared not contradict superstition and mothers trusted secret remedies over imperial physicians. In that pressure-cooked silence, Marfa's illness deepened, unnoticed by those who believed the stars had already approved her fate. The selection that crowned her also trapped her, sealing her path toward a marriage she was no longer strong enough to survive. And as the wedding date approached, the fortress that had tested her body prepared to witness something far darker. The bride's selection was over, but its final judgment had only just begun. Behind the locked doors of palaces and the guarded language of chronicles, another figure moved in fear and silence. A woman history barely names yet cannot erase, the mother of Marfa Sobakina. In the 16th century, a Tsar's bride was not merely a daughter, but a vessel for dynastic survival, and a mother's love was measured by results, not intention. Failure to conceive could mean disgrace, exile, or worse, and every woman in Muscovy knew what became of those who disappointed power. As Marfa's strength waned after the brutal selection rituals, panic took hold within her family quarters, a quiet terror that the bride might reach the wedding night already judged unworthy. Court physicians offered prayers and herbs, but their remedies moved slowly, and time was an enemy no one could challenge. It was in this narrow space, between fear and hope, that forbidden knowledge entered the story. Mercury, praised by learned men of the age as a purifier of the body, and a spark for fertility, circulated through whispered advice, passed from midwives to noblewomen, from kitchens to chapels. To modern eyes, it was poison. To the 16th century, it was medicine touched by danger, yet sanctioned by desperation. According to later accounts, preserved in diplomatic notes and marginal comments in chronicles, a potion was prepared in secret and given to Marfa, not as an act of malice, but as a final attempt to protect her from the fate of childless queens. The dose, however, did not heal. It consumed. Mercury does not strike like a blade. It erodes, attacking from within, draining strength while leaving few visible wounds. The bridal chamber sealed in fear. The bridal chamber of 1571 was meant to symbolize renewal, yet it quickly became a room heavy with dread, watched by servants who measured time, not in hours, but in breaths. Marfa Sobakina lay beneath embroidered covers while candles burned low, their wax pooling like silent witnesses to a body that was failing faster than anyone dared admit. Court custom demanded discretion, and so the doors remained shut, the curtains drawn, and the truth trapped inside with the bride. Priests murmured prayers outside, physicians lingered in adjoining rooms, and attendants exchanged glances filled with fear, knowing that any wrong word could cost a life. Within the chamber, Marfa's strength ebbed. She could barely sit upright. Her skin took on a dull pallor, and her once steady gaze drifted, unfocused, as if she were already slipping beyond the world of ritual and rule. The wedding night passed without the joy promised by ceremony, replaced instead by quiet alarms and hurried footsteps. No proclamation was made, no celebration extended, only silence carefully maintained for the sake of appearances. The empire could not be seen to falter. On the night it sought stability. When the Tsar entered, his presence did not bring comfort. Even the terrible was a man shaped by suspicion, and the sight of a weakening bride fed his darkest instincts. He questioned physicians, demanded answers from priests, and searched faces for signs of deceit. None could offer certainty. To admit ignorance was dangerous. To suggest poisoning was unthinkable without proof. And so explanations were wrapped in prayers and vague reassurances, while the bride continued to decline. Outside the chamber, rumors took shape. Guards whispered of curses. Servants spoke of powders hidden in food. Some remembered other brides who had died and wondered whether fate itself had turned against the Tsar. Each rumor deepened the atmosphere of fear, tightening the invisible noose around the household. As days passed, the chamber became a place avoided, its doors approached only by those ordered to enter. The smell of incense grew heavier, mixed with the sharp bitterness of medicines hastily prepared and rejected. Marfa's suffering was slow and visible, and yet it remained officially unspoken. The empire waited, suspended between hope and terror. When death finally came, it did not arrive with ceremony. It slipped in quietly, ending the struggle of a young woman whose life had been consumed by expectation. The moment her breath stopped, the fear within the palace changed form. Silence hardened into resolve, grief twisted into anger, and suspicion demanded blood. The bridal chamber, once sealed to protect appearances, now became the center of an unfolding reckoning. Ivan did not ask whether the death was accidental or born of desperation. He asked who would answer for it. And as the doors were opened at last, Moscow stood on the brink of vengeance that would spill far beyond the walls of that darkened room. The Tsar's revenge death did not soften the heart of Ivan the Terrible. It sharpened it. When the body of Marfa Sobakina was carried from the palace, wrapped in ritual cloth and silence, the Tsar's grief turned outward, searching for enemies who could absorb his rage. In a court where fear already ruled daily life, her death became proof that betrayal had penetrated even the bridal chamber. Ivan demanded explanations not from fate or medicine, but from people. Interrogations began quietly, then violently. Servants were questioned, physicians detained, relatives watched. Whispers of poison hardened into accusations, and accusations quickly became verdicts. The idea that the death might have been an accident, or the result of ignorance rather than intent, had no place in a mind shaped by years of conspiracy. The Tsar believed someone had murdered his bride, and belief alone was enough to condemn. Reports preserved in later chronicles and diplomatic correspondence describe a wave of executions that followed. A nobleman was said to have been put to death publicly, his punishment staged as a warning to all who dared interfere with the Tsar's household. Others disappeared quietly, removed in the night, their names erased from official memory. Whether the exact number was 20 or fewer mattered little. What mattered was the message. Mercy had ended with the bride's life. The oprichniki, Ivan's feared enforcers, moved through Moscow with renewed authority, seizing suspects and enforcing silence. Fear seeped into every household connected, even distantly, to the Sobakin family. Marfa's mother, whose desperation may have begun the tragedy, vanished from the records, her fate left deliberately unclear, a silence more terrifying than any confirmed execution. For the court, survival depended on obedience and forgetting. The official narrative avoided details, speaking only of illness and divine will, while the truth circulated in whispers no one dared write down. Ivan's revenge did not restore order. It deepened the paranoia already consuming his reign. Each execution confirmed his belief that enemies lurked everywhere, and each act of violence made the empire more unstable. Foreign envoys noted the shift, writing of a ruler more isolated, more brutal, convinced that only terror could protect him from loss. The death of one young woman thus became a catalyst for suffering far beyond her family. It justified cruelty, hardened laws, and strengthened a system that punished suspicion as severely as proven guilt. As blood stained Moscow's streets, the wedding that had promised continuity delivered chaos instead. Yet even amid the executions, one truth remained buried. If Mercury had caused Marfa's death, It was not administered with the intent to kill. It was given in fear and ignorance, a choice shaped by a world that valued fertility above life itself. But Avon did not see nuance. He saw treachery. And in his vengeance, he transformed private tragedy into public terror, setting the stage for an empire governed not by justice, but by dread. The question that remained, unspoken and unresolved, was whether the monster history remembers was born that night or merely revealed. 15 days that changed in empire history remembers numbers because they are easier than grief. And in this case, the number was 15. 15 days was all it took for a wedding meant to stabilize a realm, to unravel the last restraints of a ruler and harden fear into state policy. Marfa Sobakina entered the chronicles as a bride, passed through them as a patient, and exited as a mystery whose brief life carried consequences far greater than her rank or years. After the executions faded from public view and the court returned to its rehearsed silence, Moscow did not return to normal. It changed. The air of suspicion that had long surrounded the throne thickened into something permanent. Illness was no longer misfortune. It was conspiracy. Advice was no longer counsel. It was threat. The Tsar withdrew further into isolation, trusting fewer voices, listening more closely to rumors than to reason. Foreign observers noticed the shift immediately. Diplomatic letters from the period describe a court where fear spoke louder than law and where mercy had become a liability. The death of a young bride was cited not as a tragedy, but as justification for harsher measures, stronger controls, and wider purges. In the private rooms of the Kremlin, physicians revised their practices, abandoning remedies once praised, terrified that another mistake could cost their lives. Mothers whispered warnings to daughters, not about love or marriage, but about survival. What made the tragedy endure was not only the violence that followed, but the uncertainty that surrounded it. No document definitively proved poison. No confession settled the matter. The story of Mercury survived because it fit the age, a time when medicine blurred into alchemy and desperation, disguised itself as care. Historians would later argue whether the tale was exaggerated, embroidered by fear, or shaped to explain a ruler's cruelty. Yet even skepticism could not erase the pattern. A woman was chosen, weakened, wed, and buried in just over 2 weeks, and an empire responded by embracing terror as governance. Even the terrible did not recover from this loss. If anything, it confirmed his darkest beliefs, that love invited vulnerability, that trust led to death, and that power survived only through fear. In later years, his reign would be marked by acts so brutal that chroniclers struggled to describe them without trembling. Some traced that descent to earlier wounds, others to this moment, when a private tragedy was converted into public doctrine. What cannot be denied is that the wedding of 1571 became a symbol, a warning carved into history. It showed how systems built on obedience and silence leave no room for human error, how a mother's attempt to help could be interpreted as murder, and how rulers who demand perfection inevitably punish failure with blood. 15 days ended a life, but they also revealed a truth that echoes through centuries. When fear governs, innocence offers no protection. And in the shadows of that bridal chamber, humanity itself was put on trial and found guilty.